And now it's time for Choice Cuts, the recommendation segment of the podcast. And following my experiences last week with Marina Keegan's essays, this week I've recommended to Poppy the work of Paula Rego. Paula Rego, if you're not familiar, is a Portuguese artist who moved to Britain. She was in her 20s to study here and has mostly been working in Britain since then. She's also a dame.
Is she?
Of her excellence. Yeah, she's Dame Paula Rego. And her work is quite eclectic, and she's moved in her career from earlier working on kind of abstract things to a more representational style. Often her work focuses on women, and the piece that we're going to be looking at today was worked on in the late 90s. It's called Untitled, unhelpfully, and it's her exploration of abortion in Portugal and her views on the plight of women in 20th century Portugal.
Kind of a response to the fact that it was illegal to get an abortion in Portugal for so long.
It was, yeah. What triggered Rego to work on these pictures was the 1998 referendum in order to legalise abortion in Portugal. And the no vote won by just over 1%, but the turnout in the election was 32%. It was less than a third of the population turned out to vote. And Rego was so appalled by this, she was like, okay, there's something, we need to do something, I need to kind of motivate the population, because she'd seen the kind of horrors that women had been subjected to, not being able to access abortions. And she was like, I need to do something to change this. And between July 1998 and February 1999, she worked on these series of pictures, 10 pastels and I think about as many etchings as well. And these were exhibited across Portugal. And the idea of including the etchings was to increase the range, because the prints are easier to transport than the pastels, so she could move them to where the prints couldn't go, to where the paintings couldn't go. Sorry.
See, I wasn't a huge fan of the etchings. I really loved the pastels and the colour choices that were in them, but I found the etchings not as aesthetically pleasing.
Interesting that you should use aesthetically pleasing, because yeah, the colours and the pastels are kind of an odd choice. I think you wouldn't expect something so bright to be used to portray such dark subject matter. But
I think it provides a really great contrast to the look of the women who are in the pictures. Who some of the women are looking directly at the viewer, and others are kind of curled up in pain or in sorrow. But I really love the really vibrant colours. There's like one with yellow and then a blue and then a red belt, and it's just really stands out to you, which I think is good when it's about that kind of subject matter. It's like it kind of should catch your eye. And
yeah, well, Rego herself said that this was her intention. She said that she wanted to make them look agreeable, was the word she uses, in order to make people look at the subject matter. Do you want to just kind of give a sense of what the pictures depict?
Yeah, so there's different women in varying states of getting an abortion, really. There's a couple sitting on top of bowls or jugs, others lying in bed. As I said, some are curled up in pain, some of them are head thrown back in despair almost.
Or agony.
And then others are looking quite defiantly at, I don't want to say camera because I don't even know if the word photographs.
The viewer.
Yeah, the viewer. Quite a lot of them actually are looking directly at the viewer. And then there's an odd one of a nurse, which I thought was kind of out of place.
Well, I suppose it's out of place in that all the other ones are of people having abortions, whereas this one is of someone helping someone to have an abortion.
Yeah. And there's all these kind of nice wee details that she's got in the pictures. Like there's a watch or someone, like the red bell, buckets and chairs, and then there's all the women are in kind of different degrees of dress, which kind of allude to the different classes and the different ages of the women there. So there's a couple of young girls dressed in school uniforms. There's a woman in what looks like a kind of corset type thing, and then there's like women in quite formal evening gowns.
I believe that they are all supposed to be young girls.
Oh.
This is what I've read, Rego talking about it. And I agree that some of them look obviously like they're young girls because their faces look young and they're wearing school uniforms, but I think they're all supposed to be pretty young, apart from that one exception of the abortionists rather than the women receiving the abortion. But comparing these images to the sketches, that Rego produced when she was working on the piece. There's quite a stark difference there in terms of, I suppose, explicitness in the final pastels.
Yeah.
They don't really include the kind of gory details of the abortion process in the way that the sketches do.
But I find the sketches very difficult to ascertain what is actually going on in them. So I found them like a lot less compelling than the pastels.
They are just sketches. They weren't exhibited as part of the exhibition. But in them, they're a lot more kind of explicit about the details of the process. Whereas in the pastels, those parts of the process, you can't see any blood, but blood is suggested by the use of reds, and the kind of disorder of the process is symbolised by her use of objects and buckets and things knocked over, chairs knocked over. You can see that there's been a real struggle in the process.
Yeah, and I think there's what I love the most about them in the sketchings and the etchings and the pastels is the focus on the actual physical form of the female body.
Mm-hmm.
They're all quite similar, I think. But I love the way that she's drawn the legs and the arms, is that you can really see the tautness of the muscles and the shape of the muscle, which I just find really, really interesting to look at, because they're almost at angles that you don't often see in art.
I think the way that Rego portrays the female body in general is really interesting. If there's kind of a dominant aesthetic in Rego's work, it would be the grotesque, and I don't really see that in this piece. But people read the grotesque in Rego's work as a kind of rejection of sexualized representations of the female. And although I don't think that the grotesque appears so much in these paintings, I think we're seeing the same thing at work. I think Rego is rejecting a portrayal of women as purely sexualized beings.
She's also rejecting the idea that they're victims in this scenario.
Yeah, absolutely.
All the women, like a lot of them, are looking at the viewer, and others are, they are curled up, or they're not looking towards their audience almost. But she states that they're all there out of their own choice. Mm-hmm. They're not forced into this situation. There's a quote that says, "Crucially, they are doing this, they are not having it done to them. It is their right and their choice. None of them accepts the role of the victim."
Yeah.
And I just find that like a really, I don't know if empowering is the right word, but it's quite a forceful, it makes the collection quite forceful. It's very, kind of hits you head on.
I think that's especially true in the paintings, in the pastels, as you say, but where the subject is looking straight out at the viewer, because their gaze is just so uncompromising and so confident. The society in Portugal at this time was post the authoritarian regime of Salazar, which was deeply Catholic and enforced Catholic doctrine. But even when Portugal had moved into a democratic model, it was still profoundly Catholic. And these women, I think, looking out, are rejecting a society that would portray them as criminals or weak. Mm-hmm. And they're kind of asserting their own power.
Yeah, there's a real strength behind the images.
I don't know, the gaze is interesting because I don't know whether to read it as a kind of invitation in to the paintings, or is it a rejection of the viewer and saying a kind of assertion of independence, and we don't need the viewer because the gaze is so powerful and so independent.
I think it's we don't need the viewer.
Yeah,
that's how I took it anyway. I just felt like I was.
It's almost it kind of makes you uncomfortable though, because it's like you're a voyeur who's not needed there. You get that impression from the gaze that that kind of fierce independence.
We're not needed there. It is wholly their thing. But I love how some of them also look quite bored.
What ones in particular do you think look?
The woman in the red dress standing up against the wall.
Mm-hmm.
She looks quite bored.
Untitled number 8.
So I've not paid attention to the titles of them. The woman who's got her legs in between the two chairs.
Yeah. That's number 5.
And then the woman who's lying on the bed or the couch with the yellow blanket underneath her, looking up at the ceiling.
That's part of the triptych.
She just seems kind of like she's just waiting for it to be done. Do you know what I mean? And I kind of like that it's almost every day. It's just quite...
Well,
there's a nonchalantness that I quite like about it.
I think that, you say it's every day, and maybe not quite every day, but I think what motivated Rego to make these pictures was the fact that abortion was such a common occurrence.
Yeah.
And, Portugal at the time, without the use of contraception, it was something that women had to go through all the time. And without a legal means of doing that, it was always going to be a brutal process. But I think the strongest thing about these pictures is the way that they kind of challenge the black and white thinking that happens in debates on abortion. It's such a...
Yeah, and it's such a kind of prevalent topic just now. I read a statistic recently that says that women who are married and who have already had children are like the majority of women that go and get abortions. Like, they've already had kids and they can't afford to raise another one. And I just find that really interesting because that's not what is portrayed at all about abortions. It's like teen pregnancy and, it's all this horrible kind of like circumstances, when in reality it could be literally any circumstance. Like, there's no telling why anyone's going to get an abortion.
And the two sides in the abortion debate are so passionate and so fierce and so convinced of their rightness. And I think Paula Rego kind of pokes holes in at least the pro-life argument and that certainty in these pictures.
Yeah, I mean, she's certainly coming from a pro-choice.
I think that the pro-life kind of argument, I don't mean to misrepresent either side of the argument. I won't try not to let my own views affect this, but often the women who are doing the abortions from that perspective are portrayed as criminals who are, essentially murderers. But Rego complicates that in these paintings by portraying the women having the abortions as children. So they are maybe murderers from a pro-life perspective, but you're also seeing that they're victims. And it also challenges that kind of...
But they're not victims.
No, they're not victims either. They're kind of asserting their own independence and power. So it's such
a complicated...
She completely splits that dichotomy. And also the kind of virgin whore representation of women in art. She completely turns that on its head, because these women, they're sinners 2 times over. They've not only have they had sex, but they've also they're committing an act of murder. But also they resemble schoolgirls. They're like innocent, virginal qualities, and she's kind of challenging this kind of idea that women are either virgins or whores by creating these figures that have examples of the two features.
Yeah, it's a really deep collection that totally forces you to think about the backstory to each of the women and about the abortion argument as a whole.
There was an interesting quote that I read from Paula Rego, and she was talking about the role of pain and pleasure in the paintings.
The pain, the physical pain, and the erotic bit are tied. Those girls in the pictures are in a position which could be either for penetration of some kind of abortionist's hand or penetration from her lover. One or the other, they're both equal. And the two things are deeply tied in those pictures.
Those things are deeply tied in the pictures. And you can see that looking at them, especially Untitled 5, where the woman's got her leg up on 2 chairs. Her legs are spread and they're kind of propped up. It's ambiguous. And, the gaze that she's looking at, it could be a gaze at an abortionist, it could be the gaze of a lover. I think that's really effective because it sets up this connection between pain and pleasure, and suggests that when a woman decides to have sex with a man, she's risking the pain of either abortion or of childbirth. And those things are intimately tied, especially in a society where contraception is not available and legal abortion is not available. There's this intimate link between pleasure and pain for a woman.
Yeah, it is a really interesting connection. And I guess, because Portugal's a Catholic country, isn't it? The birth rates are extremely high due to the powerful religious impact in the country, but also therefore the abortion rates are probably significantly higher. But obviously they're all, well, we're all illegal. It is legal now.
It is legal now, yeah. You know, I watched a documentary about Paula Rego recently. It was on the BBC, and they had interviews with the Prime Minister in Portugal at the time, and he was talking about the influence of these paintings, and he said it really ruffled some feathers.
As I think about any work to do with abortion does.
Yeah, but you know, especially in such a deeply Catholic country as Portugal. But then in 2007, they had another referendum, and abortion was legalised this time by a 59% majority. And I don't know how much we can attribute that to Paula Rego's paintings, but certainly it does seem to have some influence in
yeah, she's certainly part of a growing movement of people who are being more liberal.
And I mean, she's a big name in Portugal. She's got her own museum. I think she may be... I tried to fact check this, but I couldn't find anything. But I think she might be the only living artist to have her own museum, which she does in Portugal. Yeah.
Wow.
So, you know, she's kind of a superstar there. So, you know, it makes sense that...
That's fascinating. She's like the Dali and... who's the other big Spanish guy?
Picasso?
No, the other one.
Velasquez? Goya?
No, maybe it is Picasso. It's not... No, Gaudi is what I'm thinking of.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Of Portugal. I think that's really interesting. Just because you... Like, I don't know, I go to Spain and go to these museums, and then there's actually someone living out there.
Yeah.
With their own mum.
But she doesn't live there. She lives in Britain.
Yeah, but like, I mean, out in the
London.
world.
Yeah.
And she's a woman. That's amazing. I mean, I don't have the most intellectual understanding of visual art in that sense. But yeah, I don't have that intellectual criticism towards art of that kind. But I did enjoy it, and I liked the... Like, particularly was really drawn to the shapes that she managed to create and how lifelike they were of the female form.
One thing that I was thinking about when looking at... Or it was actually at night after having looked at these pictures, was kind of the nature of my own pleasure. I don't want to use the word pleasure, but you know, my own... Because I like looking at these paintings, you know, and I get a lot from them. But I was just wondering about what that... You know, how do we understand what that feeling is? Because, you know, what is being portrayed in these pictures is so sort of harrowing, and when you're looking at them, you know, the suffering is so palpable, yet you can also enjoy looking at them. So what is that that's so enjoyable?
Well, it's a bit like a lot of the criticism for Orange Is the New Black is that it was trauma porn, in that situations of horror and traumatic situations were made purely for the viewer's enjoyment.
But what is that then? Where does enjoyment come from, do you think?
We as humans love drama.
Is it drama?
Yeah.
Is it the drama?
It's conflict.
Of the abortion? Is it conflict in there? I suppose there's the conflict between...
Well, I don't know. I find the images quite dramatic because of the shapes that are used in them. Because of the expressions of the body and the fact that it's a full body expression. It's not just a look on someone's face. It's this complete... You know, every limb is involved in the choice that's being made there. And that is really dramatic to look at.
I suppose conflict is an interesting way to look at it, because these pictures are filled with conflict, both between the woman and the fetus, and the woman and society. But there's
also, though, in quite a few of them, the conflict of colours, because all the colours are really standing out. But then, I mean, all the women are white, and they've got all very pale skin, so that stands in complete conflict to the rest of the colours.
As the conflict of, you know, subject matter and colour. But I think there's maybe a difference when talking about conflict between Orange Is the New Black, which has a narrative which progresses through time, and these pictures where there's sort of a narrative there, but you put it there. It's not this... I don't know if it's the same experience as watching a story unfold.
Oh no, I don't think it's the same experience at all, but I think there is that human enjoyment of seeing suffering, almost.
I've heard the theory before that we enjoy watching people suffer because it makes us feel sympathy, and we like that because it tells us that we are sympathetic people and we're nice and we care about people.
Yes.
But your experience of these paintings, positive? Or pastels, I keep calling them paintings, sorry. Pastels.
Yeah, I thought